Hello, First Lutheran, and welcome back to another daily devotion. My name is Tyler Bublitz. I'm the Director of Youth and Family Ministry, and today I wanted to talk about stories. I love stories. And believe it or not, for me, one of my other passions is drums, and I think drums tell a lot of stories. Some of them, when I'm cleaning them and restoring them, they start telling me a story. Sometimes I know what the story is and what the drum has been through, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I can just see the battle scars of where the chrome is coming off, where it got a nick or a knack. Sometimes it's the story of time. I have this drum here and here from the 1930s, from the 1940s, and a lot of these today are from the 60s, and this is from the late 70s or 80s. All those telling a different story. When I play the drums, there's a different story that each one tells. They sound different to me, and I can hear differences, hence why I have a variety of tools to produce different sounds. But to me, as I'm going through and looking at these as different members, people, veterans, and trying to help and clean and pull off old dirty chrome to try to bring back their former luster, and sometimes seeing the marks and pains of things gone on in the past, it really gets me thinking about a lot of other types of stories that at times we don't necessarily recognize. And it got me thinking about a very familiar passage to many of us in Mark's Gospel in the 10th chapter, starting on the 13th verse. People were bringing little children to him in order that they might touch them, and the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the little children come to me. Do not stop them, for it is such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." And he took them in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. I think about it in two ways. One is this drum right here. It's one of my favorite drums that I have. It's not really all that valuable. There's been a lot of modifications that have been made along the way, and when I got it, it definitely didn't look like this. This drum, the shell, is from the 1920s, and I spent time with a person from a former church that I was at, shout out to Tom Rivers, and we spent a whole summer restoring this to bring it to its former glory that we could interpret. And I got to spend a lot of time learning about this drum and also the person I was working with, which was awesome. But to me, there's a story here that I slowly have been able to understand and try to learn, because there's a lot of different drum technology on this drum compared to a modern day snare drum. But this also has got me thinking about the drummers themselves. So I have two lists of names, and I would love to hear how many of you have heard people's names from these two lists. So here's list one: Ringo Starr, Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, Ed Shaughnessy, Phil Collins, Bunny Carlos, Louis Bellson, John Bonham, Hal Blaine, Neil Peart, Keith Moon, Joe Morello, Alex Van Halen, Chad Smith. Okay, that's list one. List two: Max Roach, Chick Webb, Philly Joe Jones, Papa Joe Jones, Elvin Jones, Art Blakey, Earl Palmer, Tony Williams, Cindy Blackman, Questlove, Baby Dodds, Carter Buford, Lester Estelle, Roy Haynes. How many of you heard from the second list? All these drummers that I've listed are in the Drummer Hall of Fame. The simple difference between the two lists is list one was white. List two was black. Simple difference. What's frustrating, and even to me, is I know a lot of those names on the second list, but I don't know really that much about them. See, the difference is the list one are all drummers with popular groups or played in stages that people knew their names. Playing from multiple different jazz groups to Ed Shaughnessy being with Johnny Carson. And we have all these famous drummers from Rush to Van Halen in that list. But list 2 isn't any less stacked. You have Max Roach, who was a great jazz drummer, but was also a great activist and vocalist for the black community. You have Philly Joe Jones and Papa Joe Jones playing for like Miles Davis, playing for Count Basie. But we don't know them. Charlie Parker's drummer is on this list. Prince's drummer is on this list. Questlove is with Jimmy Fallon nightly. But I don't even myself know as much about these black drummers and their stories as I should. When I reflect upon the Mark text, Jesus is taking the disciples and saying, don't put yourself holier than thou. Let these little children, these ones that you are saying aren't worthy, still come to me so that I can interact with them and talk with them and hear their stories. In this time that's very chaotic, I think it's a time where we need to make sure that we're hearing stories. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, is just to listen and hear the stories. And I know for me, I need to be digging into a little bit of my drumming history. I hope this was helpful to you, and I look forward to hearing from you.